Welcome.
My name is George Mann, and I'm the writer of Newbury and Hobbs, Witchwood, and Star Wars The High Republic.
This is Kevin Shinnick, writer of Star Wars Force Collector.
I'm Kevin Scott, one of the story architects of Star Wars The High Republic.
This is Dominic Pace, who plays Gekko the Bounty Hunter from The Mandalorian.
Hi, I'm Claudia Gray. I write Star Wars books.
And you're listening.
And you are listening.
And you are listening
to Star Wars Comics in Canon. The Force is strong with this one.
Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 128. So my friends, happy anniversary of Return of the Jedi. Yes, so 2023 brings the 40th year anniversary of the final film in the original trilogy of Star Wars. And to celebrate that, there's quite a few Return of the Jedi-esque things coming out this year. One of them is the Certain Point of View book, which has got a variety of short stories in there from different characters. You know, there's been one for A New Hope and there's been one from Empire Strikes Back. And from a certain point of view has loads of incredible people, including Mary Kenny, who is actually a guest on Genuine Chit-Chat a few months ago. She was one of the writers on Spider-Man Miles Morales. She is a writer in the upcoming Wolverine game, and she's also written a book called Gamer Girls, and now she's written a Star War. So that's all good fun there. I believe that book, the release date has been brought forward, so I think it's actually going to be coming out in August time. I will get around to reading it at some point, but I must confess I have not finished Empire Strikes Back Certain Point of View, because the Certain Point of View books are, they're not my favourite, if we put it that way. They've got some real gems in them, but generally they're not actually my favourite Star Wars literature. I much prefer sort of new things and etc. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about one of the other initiatives that Star Wars has put together for the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi, and that is 8 one-shot comics, all about different characters or places around the time of Return of the Jedi. Most of them seem to be taking place just before Return of the Jedi, so kind of leading into the movie. And I must admit, I was quite excited when they announced this, and I was even more excited at the more titles that have been announced. So for this episode, I'm tackling Jabba's Palace, Ewoks, and Lando. And then we've also got Empire, Rebellion, and Max Rebo coming out. And then later on in the year, we've got Emperor Palpatine and Smugglers. So the two I'm most excited for out of those is Max Rebo and Palpatine, because we don't really know that much about Palpatine. Obviously, from the prequels, we know quite a bit, but sort of in the original trilogy era, we don't really get that much. We seem to get a short story about him in each of the Certain Point of View books, so I assume there'll be another one in the Return of the Jedi one. So I'm excited about that. But the main one I'm the most excited for is Max Rebo. In fact, while recording this right now, I am wearing my Max Rebo t-shirt that I got from Star Wars Celebration, and you may be able to see it. I recently recorded an episode of Star Wars Rebels Reviewed. It's not going to be out when this episode drops. It'll be out in the coming weeks. That's where myself, Matt and Dave talk about Star Wars Rebels, and we watch a whole season and then talk about that. And I'm wearing the same Max Rebo t-shirt there as well. So keep an eye across the podmosphere for me, and you'll occasionally see that t-shirt. If you really want to see it, you can go on any of my social media platforms. Instagram's probably the best place, because I did post a picture of it when I got it from Star Wars Celebration. And if you haven't joined the show before, hello there, welcome, hope you have a great time. But in this show, what I do is I go through the plot details of each of the comics that I've got in chronological order, and then along the way I'll give you a bit more bonus information about certain characters or species, planets, or things that just show up elsewhere in the canon, and occasionally I'll give a little bit of information on their connection to legends, depending on what it is. So this serves as a great way for you to get a wider understanding of the Star Wars canon, while also understanding what's going on in the comic realm of Star Wars, while still keeping in with the canon. But I will always say, please try and support the creators of this release. Please try and pick up the comics where you can, or read them on Marvel Unlimited, or borrow them from libraries or anything. Please just try and support comics in that way where you can. But this show is made because I understand not everyone can pick up the comics. Either they can't afford to, or they don't have the time, or whatever. Some people just don't have them available in their countries. So this serves as a great way, if you've never read the comics before, to serve as a kind of substitute. But if you have read the comics, maybe I'll go through something that you may have missed, or species, or you just get an expanded version of the canon with the additional information I add. But yeah, quite excited about this initiative. So there will be 3 episodes across the year from myself. The next episode is probably going to be out sort of late August, early September, because the Max Rebo comic comes out in August, so I'll be receiving it within a month of it coming out, because I normally get comic deliveries once a month. And then I imagine the Palpatine and the Smugglers issues, they'll be out slightly later in 2023, so The trade paperback collection of all of these is meant to be released November 7th, 2023, so I presume all of them will be out before then, so I imagine I'll probably have this series finished sort of mid to late November, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's delve into these 3 comics. So all of the comics seem to take place around 4 years after the Battle of Yavin, because that's when Return of the Jedi takes place. Battle of Yavin is A New Hope, when they destroy the Death Star, and there's 3 years after A New Hope until Empire Strikes Back, and then between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, it's only 1 year. Now, at the moment, the majority of ongoing series for Star Wars comics are taking place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. That is the Dr. Aphra comics from 2020, that's the Darth Vader comics from 2020, that's the Star Wars main run of comics from 2020, and the Bounty Hunters comics. So all of those are taking place, and there is a little connection to one of them actually in the Lando comic. Don't worry, there's no spoilers, because it even mentions the issue isn't out yet, but I'll get to that slightly later on. I will also note that Return of the Jedi is my favourite of the original trilogy films at the moment, as of recording this. Maybe it's because I'm being swept up in the 40th anniversary thing, but it kind of changes between Empire and Return of the Jedi, depending on what day you get me. But with that all in mind, let's delve into the first comic, and that is Return of the Jedi, Jabba's Palace. So the Jabba's Palace comic is written by Marc Guggenheim, the artist is Alessandro Miracolo, and the colour artist is Dee Cunniffe. The issue was released March 29th, 2023, and all of these issues should be released in the trade paperback collection, which is going to be released 7th of November, 2023, and it seems like this trade paperback is going to be called Scoundrels, Rebels, and the Empire. So although this comic is named Return of the Jedi, Jabba's Palace, the actual story is called The Four Favors. So with that in mind, let's get into the crawl. With the Rebel Alliance and the Galactic Empire locked in a civil war for control of the galaxy, criminals, scoundrels, and gangsters find new ways to profit from the chaos. Chief among these is a crime lord, Jabba the Hutt, who rules over a criminal empire based on the outer rim planet of Tatooine. From his palace, Jabba commands his organization of thugs, thieves, and bounty hunters by appealing to their greed and taking advantage of their fear. So the comic initially starts with the droid EV-9D9 telling C-3PO that the last protocol droid that worked for Jabba was disintegrated. That's obviously one of the iconic scenes right at the start of Return of the Jedi, and so the droid that tells 3PO this, that you actually do see in Return of the Jedi, is called EV-9D9. Now you actually get to see them in The Mandalorian twice, is in Chapter 5 and Chapter 10. They are a feminine Merrin Data EV series supervisor droid, and they were actually a moisture evaporator mechanic, but obviously fell into the hands of Jabba the Hutt eventually, and seems to have a defect where she enjoys torturing and dismembering droids. So nice and sadistic. But you don't need to worry about Evie very much, because she doesn't really pop up in this comic again. So after Evie says that to 3PO, in the movie you see the other protocol droid, which is kind of attached by the wrists and is being like pulled apart and sparks are coming out and things, and it's, even though it's a droid, it's pretty unpleasant to watch. That droid is called ATM, and that is the droid that this comic is focusing on. So ATM is obviously a protocol droid and just kind of found itself working as Jabba's translator. Now, when they were doing this, they found it to be easy and also quite boring and unfulfilling, until a Twi'lek called Sylvan Khan shows up and offers ATM a chance to escape. But in exchange for this, ATM has to do 3 favours, and then Sylvan Khan will remove the restraining bolt. Because pretty much all droids in service have got restraining bolts on them. It doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, because a lot of kind of neutral people have it, is to stop droids running away, or I don't know if it helps prevent droids from being stolen, but it stops droids, you know, randomly attacking you if they're even capable of that, or going a certain distance away from however you program the restraining bolt. There's not really been much information about restraining bolts in the canon. They just kind of plonk them on a droid and then they're just kind of restrained, I suppose. But these 3 favours, so the first favour that ATM needs to do is to poison a Quarren. Now the droid does this, but the poison isn't to kill, it's just to incapacitate for a while, and this is so that Sylvan Khan could then check Jabba's books for information, as in his finances and those sort of things, because Sylvan Khan works in that kind of arena, and therefore when Jabba's main bookkeeper suddenly became ill, Jabba then turned to someone who could help, which was Sylvan Khan. So with that information that Sylvan collected, he used it to spread information around a lot of Jabba's subordinates and worsened rivalries, kind of got people riled up in a sense. Now I will say, with this issue in particular, the artwork is absolutely incredible. Alessandro Miracolo and Dee Cunniffe did an amazing job, because there are so many background species in this. Like, obviously when you see the Jabba's Palace scene in Return of the Jedi, it's akin to the Cantina scene in A New Hope. There's just so many aliens and so many different species, and there was so much work that went into that. And if you want to hear a little bit about that, I actually interviewed a gentleman named Michael McCormick, who's I call him the Puppet Master. He worked with Jim Henson on Labyrinth and Dark Crystal and also Return of the Jedi. And there's a couple of characters that he actually helped create, including Salacious B. Crumb. He actually created that character. So if you want to hear my conversation with him, the best place is probably on YouTube, but the gentleman's name is Michael McCormick. And you can find the video version on YouTube, youtube.com/genuine Chit-Chat. And in there, you actually get to see Michael McCormick show some of the puppets that were used in Labyrinth. So it was a very, very cool conversation. But yeah, the artwork in this comic is brilliant. Really recommend it. I mean, the artwork on all these comics, especially the Ewoks one, is really worth reading. So with these ones, these 3 comics I've tackled, although plot-wise they are good, I would say different degrees of good, but I'll kind of go into that when I've tackled all 3 of them. But none of them are bad, don't get me wrong. But the artwork is really the star here, I'd find. I do anyway have an issue of one-shots because I just find there's not that many stories you can kind of start and end that has a lot of intrigue and growth and interesting and important stuff to the lore that you can actually put in one comic. It's just, it doesn't really work that well. Whereas if you want to give like bonus information or hyper-focus on a specific character, it can work. But you know, when we get like an Obi-Wan one-shot, I'm like, I'll read it, but I don't really care because what else can you add to Obi-Wan's character? But when we get a one-shot about like a side character or things we don't get to see that often, that's when I'm a lot more intrigued. And I will probably say that this Jabba's Palace is probably my favourite of these 3. So we've got Sylvan Khan, who is obviously spreading information around the people living in Jabba's palace. I think they all live there. You know, you saw that bit where Leia, when she's disguised as Boushh, opens up where Han Solo is and frees him out of carbonite, and then everyone's just kind of around there watching. So I assume that everyone who's kind of in Jabba's palace, for the most part, sleeps there as well. Doesn't look like very comfortable sleeping arrangements, but anyway. So Sylvan Khan then looks even more into Jabba's sort of books and his information and finds out who Jabba was favouring and who he wasn't favouring, so some of Jabba's kind of favourites. And then he adjusted some of the figures, a very, very small amount, almost so you couldn't even tell anything has been changed, just so there's certain rivalries that get worse and worse over a period of time. Due to Sylvan's kind of tinkering and involvement, an Ithorian and a Grand then fight. The Ithorian seems to win, picks up the Grand by its throat, is going to give the killing blow, but then Sylvan Khan suggests to Jabba to not do that. So the Grand is then spared, the Ithorian is mad, and so Sylvan Khan then speaks to him. Now an Ithorian, so it's Ithorian or Ithorian, I think it's Ithorian, but I've pronounced it in both different ways. So they are an alien and they are nicknamed Hammerhead. I believe when the toys came out, after A New Hope, that was the name of them. You know, you had like things like Walrus Face and Snaggletooth and Hammerhead, kind of the slang names before every character in Star Wars had its own name. So the Ithorians have got mouths on either side of their neck, and due to that they can't speak Basic, so Galactic Basic. So they always have to have these translator collars on to be able to actually speak Basic. Now the interesting thing is that there is like 1 or 2 exceptions to this rule. I can't remember where it was. It might have been in animation or it might have been in like a comic or a book somewhere. But in the canon, there is actually an Ithorian who does speak Basic. That is generally considered to be a plot hole, but I think you can kind of hand wave it away and say they are an outlier, even though it says numerous times in the canon that they are physically incapable of speaking Basic. But then again, maybe it is possible. Maybe this one just happens to be able to speak Basic. We don't know. But in this scenario, this Ithorian cannot speak Basic without a translator. Now, another name given to Ithorians is actually a derogatory term from Imperials, and they call them leathernecks. Now, Ithorians are quite interesting because they are from the planet Ithor or Ithor, and it is a jungle planet. Ithorians are also usually pacifist, especially the ones that stay on their home planet. They worship the Mother Jungle, which is, you know, a degree of a perception of the Force, and Mother Gaia, those kind of things amalgamating together. And there are a lot of Ithorians in the galaxy. You'd have probably seen them. Obviously, they're in A New Hope, so they're in it from the get-go. They're all across the galaxy in all different places. But 2 of the main ones that kind of stand out to me, you've got Dok-Ondar, who has Dok-Ondar's Den of Antiquities. That's over at Galaxy's Edge and also features in the Galaxy's Edge anthology comics, as well as the Galaxy's Edge Black Spy Outpost book by Delilah S. Dawson. So Dok-Ondar is known. He is mentioned elsewhere as well. And then you've also got a Jedi of the High Republic called Mikkel Satmani. He is in, I think, a couple of the main adult books. I know he's in Phase 1, so if you want to find out more about Ithorians or you want stories with them, Dok-Ondar and Mikkel Satmani are probably the best places to start. So back to the story, you've got Sylvan Khan talking to this Ithorian who is angry after letting the Grand live, because obviously Jabba said spare him because of Sylvan Khan whispering in his ear. So Sylvan then goes to say that the Ithorian's tax collection is less than it should be, and that's due to Sylvan's minor manipulation. So Sylvan Khan says that you've already fell out of favour of Jabba. Jabba, you can't really change his mind on anything, so you've only got one solution, and that would be to kill Jabba. Now, he doesn't overtly say that in case people are listening, but he very heavily hints at it, and the Ithorian understands what he's saying. Now, the second favour for ATM was to be there while Sylvan is speaking to this Ithorian in private and to translate for them. The Ithorian does agree, and then Sylvan Khan then needs to get a weapon to the Ithorian, because if you take any weapons into Jabba's palace, they get taken off you, just so you can't kill Jabba. So Sylvan Khan says to ATM, you need to go and find a weapon from the armory and hide it somewhere, and then we can get it to this Ithorian. So ATM goes and gets this blaster from the armory, but is seen sneaking around and kind of whispering to Sylvan Khan by a chap named Bain Malar. Or Bain Malar, M-A-L-A-R, who accuses ATM of something, but he's really not sure what he's done. Now, Bain Malar is actually in a deleted scene in Return of the Jedi. He is also in Legends very briefly. I believe he's on like a trading card or something. And then in the canon, this is the most amount of story we get from him. He actually has speaking lines and he actually has an impact over the plot, but he's not really anywhere else. He looks like a chap in a spacesuit, but I can't see confirmation that he's the same species as the High Republic character Oberlin or any of the species that we saw, I think in Solo, a Star Wars story, or Rogue One. There's a couple of people in spacesuits, but they're like a different species. It could be the same as Bain Malar, but we don't know. So after Bain then accuses ATM of stuff, ATM is worried and speaks to Sylvan Khan about it. Sylvan Khan says, don't worry about it, it's going to be fine, and I will get you out of here, because obviously ATM has done his 3 favours for Sylvan Khan. So the following day, the Ithorian then attacks. He gets a blaster, he shoots at Jabba, and he just about misses before he is taken by Bain Malar. Sylvan Khan then asks ATM for a 4th favour, and this favour is unclear when he first says it, but it's going to become obvious in a moment. So Jabba then questions the Ithorian, and ATM is there to translate. So ATM gives false translations. So the Ithorian says, I got the blaster because this person gave it to me or that person gave it to me. And ATM is saying things like, I will never tell you about that, Jabba, and then insulting your family and your lineage, like those kinds of things. And the Ithorian understands basic but can't speak it. So he's getting frustrated, which obviously Jabba is looking at being angry about the situation. And so in response, Jabba then gets the Ithorian thrown into the pit of Carkoon, which is the Sarlacc pit as seen in Return of the Jedi. So Sylvan Khan then thanks ATM for doing that, removes the restraining bolt, and then they kind of part ways to a degree. And as ATM is figuring out how to leave and whatnot, Bain Malar sees all this happening and then takes both ATM and Sylvan Khan to Jabba. So Sylvan Khan then tries to kind of make up a lie and explain how the situation kind of occurred, and then Jabba stops him, and it's confirmed that ATM actually confirmed to Jabba everything that has been discussed. So Jabba then gets Sylvan Khan arrested. Well, I say get him arrested. He throws him in a prison, probably eventually throws him in the Sarlacc pit, but we actually don't get to see what happens to him. ATM then thanks Jabba and says that the reason he did that was because of these threats from Sylvan Khan. And then Jabba's like, oh really? Okay, what kind of threats did he say to you? And obviously ATM can't really think of any, or at least any convincing ones, because it was never the fact that he was threatened, it was the fact he was offered something. And before any further conversation between Jabba and ATM can be continued, Bain Malar then produces the restraining bolt, which ATM had removed from him by Sylvan Khan. So Bain then shows, well, clearly this is what he's done. He actually has only done these things so he can get his freedom. And so in response to that, Jabba then air quotes disintegrates him, but he doesn't actually disintegrate him. He attaches him to those almost pulleys on his limbs, and then that's how we see him as he is in Return of the Jedi. And that is where the Jabba's Palace comic ends. So I really enjoyed that one. It was a bit of fun. There was new characters, so there was a bit of dramatic tension in a way to see what kind of happened, although we knew what would happen with ATM, but kind of to see how he got in that position. So I liked that. That's the kind of one shot I thought was cool, added a little bit to the lore, a little bit of fun, but isn't like just playing the same story bits all the time. So I did enjoy that. And with that in mind, let's move on to the next issue, which is Ewoks. So this is an anthology story, so there's like a campfire story, which is very thin story. It's really just Ewoks sitting around a campfire and telling each other things. But within that, there are 3 stories in that. There's Wokling's Tale, Papalo's Tale, and Peekpa's Tale. Now, each of these has no dialogue. The campfire part also has no dialogue. So this collection was written by Alyssa Wong, and there's a variety of artists. So you've got Lee Garbett and Java Tartaglia, who did the framing story. You've got Paulina Ganucheau, who did Wokling's Tale. You've got Kyle Hotz and Rachelle Rosenberg, who did Papalo's Tale. And then you've got Casper Wijngaard, who did Peekpa's Tale. This issue was released April 12th, 2023, and here is the crawl. On the forest moon of Endor, a village of Ewoks gather around a fire to share tales of adventure and wonder. No place is safe from the war tearing the galaxy apart, not even the Ewoks' home. But for one night, their stories of courage, fear, and determination will unite them and bring them hope. Now, we'll say obviously with the prior comic, it was called Jabba's Palace 1, but the actual story was The Four Favors, whereas this one, it's just called Ewoks, and then the Lando comic, it's just called Lando. So, not sure about why they decided to call one and not the other. Maybe they're hoping to start off a Jabba's Palace anthology comic series, maybe? I don't know, but that would be quite a cool idea, to be fair, but I suspect that in the certain point of view Return of the Jedi, we're probably going to get quite a few stories about people in Jabba's Palace. But with that in mind, let's delve straight in. So on Endor, you've got some Ewoks gathering around a campfire, or more of a bonfire. It's a fire they've made. So you've got Lo Grey, who is the chieftain. He is seen in Return of the Jedi. And then you've got a character called Peekpa, who is mentioned. Peekpa, I think, is only really briefly seen in Return of the Jedi, if not only seen in like promo shots and stuff. But she is there. She was kind of retroactively added in via the canon, because she features in the Last Shot book by Daniel Jose Older. And I actually released a review of that a while ago on my Patreon, and I think I've released it on this main feed as well. But let's begin with the Wokeling's Tale, and I will repeat, there is no dialogue in these parts, so it's all very artwork heavy. So in the Wokeling's Tale, you've got a young Ewok that goes out with a bit of food and then meets up with a horse friend. Now this horse friend is something called a Bordok. It's basically like a little pony, essentially, is what it is, but this young Ewok is friends with this little pony thing. They're in Legends like a small amount, I think primarily due to there being a lot more Ewoks content in Legends, but this is the first appearance in canon. So they have a little look around, they're eating and having a bit of fun, but then they find a friendly Dulok. Now a Dulok is actually something that you saw in Tales from Vader's Castle number 4, or if you listen to episode 76 of Star Wars Comics in Canon, you'd have heard a little bit of information about that. They are in Legends because you actually see them in the Ewoks cartoon in a couple episodes, and they are also in like a book, or there's been a couple of like Ewoks books that were released as well. I'm unsure if they're in either of the Ewoks movies, I don't think they were, but they're in other content. In this issue, they essentially looks a bit like Dr. Seuss's The Grinch, kind of like a green, slenderish, hairy kind of being, but Duloks and Ewoks historically don't get on very well, and when this Dulok meets this young Ewok, when they talk, it's kind of like the dialogue, as I said, there's no dialogue, it's like speech bubbles with like images in them, and the Ewok's like, oh, wouldn't your parents be mad or anything like that? And she was like, yeah, they were, but I left them anyway. So then you get a montage of them just having fun, playing around with those two and their little pony thing, the Bordok. And after they keep going out and meeting each other, each of their respective parents is like, where do they keep going? So they each go out, and then the parents find the Dulok and the Ewok playing, and then the parents are mad about it. They start yelling at each other because, as I said, there's this rivalry and bad blood between them, but then they kind of get impressed by not only the friendship, but also with the Dulok and the Ewok being friends, they've made lots of things in this little cave, you know, like paper decorations and drawings and that kind of thing. And so the parents actually have a little look around and then kind of see that it's actually quite nice. So everyone calms down, and then all of them, the families, sit down and have food together. So that's the end of that story. Nice and simple, easy going. But one of the Ewoks, after that story was told, didn't really like it very much. And this Ewok, I think, is Paplu. And Paplu didn't really seem to like it and wants something a bit more scary. So here is the scary one, which is Paplu's Tale, and this specifically has some of my favourite Star Wars artwork in it from any comics. It makes me think a little bit of the Visions special that I tackled a few weeks ago, where the artwork just looks incredible and it's all black and white with a bit of red in it. It just looks brilliant. So Paplu's Tale, it starts off with a lot of corpses, as in a lot of Ewoks corpses, and I think it starts off with something not dissimilar to, I think, Apocalypse Now or something like that, where you've got an Ewok's eye open and a fly just walking along it, but obviously the Ewok isn't blinking because they're dead. So you've got this Ewok looking around who's wearing like red and just sees all of these corpses of Ewoks around in the forest. Everything's all in black and white. There's like a blade on the floor that's got blood on it as well. It's pretty intense. And then it seems that a Gorax sees them. So Gorax is several meters tall. Online it said they can grow up to nearly 7 meters, so massive. And they're actually, again, in the Tales from Vader's Castle number 4 in episode 76 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. And in Canon, their first appearance was in the Forces of Destiny episode called Traps and Tribulations. But you first got to see them in the Ewoks movie Caravan of Courage. They are quite a fearsome and quite a scary thing. I think in the canon, they've especially ramped up the scary element of them. But this Gorax is hunting the Ewoks, and it seems Gorax is always hunt Ewoks. It's just one of those things on Endor. This Gorax sees this Ewok and then gives chase. It's a couple of really cool pieces of artwork, and then Paplo manages to stab the Gorax's hand as it reaches for him with this broken spear. Then there's a lot more running and hiding and things, but eventually the Ewok gets grabbed and gets eaten. You just watch him get put straight into the Gorax's mouth, and then a big chomp noise, and then the Gorax looking really sinister, and that's when the story ends. So back around the campfire, the chieftain Logray bonks Paploo on the head with his staff and points to one of the really young Ewoks, showing they're scared and they got like their hands over their ears. And so 2 Ewoks decide to tell one more tale. So this is Peekpa's tale. So there's an Ewok that sets up a rope trap and it manages to pull a scout trooper off his speeder bike. So I don't know actually if this story is technically after Return of the Jedi now, because I don't know if the Ewoks had much interaction with the Empire before Leia and Luke got involved. I'm not 100% sure on this matter, so maybe this is taking place just after Return of the Jedi. I don't think it's specifically relevant because the Ewoks seemingly kind of do the same thing before and after, but anyway. So this Ewok Peekpa sets up a rope trap, tying a rope to 2 trees, pulls the rope so it's tight, and then a scout trooper on a speeder bike tries to fly through the forest and then gets pulled straight off of his speeder bike, and then Peekpa goes over to it with a club and smashes him in the face, and either kills or knocks him out, we don't know. She takes apart this speeder bike and then takes some parts and things, as well as the scout trooper's helmet, and then goes to this scrappy looking ship on this cliff edge that seems to have been put together by loads of different pieces. Over a period of time, Peekpa manages to build this and fix it and seems to have some help from fellow Ewoks and things, and there's a really nice image of Peekpa staring up at the stars. Eventually, Peekpa gets the ship running and then flies off into space, and all the Ewoks wave away, everyone being very happy. Now that's the thing, is a Peekpa being in last shot, that's a vague origin story I suppose, and Peekpa can't speak Galactic Basic but can understand Galactic Basic. I'm pretty sure from what I remember of last shot, but Peekpa is actually an incredible hacker and is very, very good with technology, so I just like this little story. I think it was Alyssa Wong's nod to that Daniel Jose Older story. So that's the end of the anthology, so there's just a smidge more of this comic left to go, and essentially the Ewoks are all getting tired after all those stories around the campfire, so they head to bed, and then one of them, as they're just getting into bed, sees a shadow or a figure of some sort, grabs a spear, and then aims it at this shadow, but it shows it's just a fire making shadows on the wall, and so the Ewok then starts to fall asleep, but is hugging like a little toy ship, and smiles, keeps it close, and that is the end of the story. So that's the end of the comic, my friends, so that means we move on to the final comic of this batch, which is Return of the Jedi, Lando. So the writer for the Lando comic is Stephanie Phillips, the artist is Alvaro López, and the colour artist is Antonio Fabela. This issue was released May the 3rd, 2023, and again should be included in the trade paperback collection with the other 2. So before delving into the Lando comic, I just want to note that there have actually been 2 Lando miniseries in the canon that I've done episodes on. So if you want to check out episode 18 of Star Wars Comics in Canon, you get to hear the Lando miniseries written by Charles Soule, which is set around the time of A New Hope. You get a lot more information about Lobot, and you also get information on the Mask of Momin, which appeared in the 2017 Vader comics and has appeared elsewhere in the comic canon as well. Or you can check out episode 37, which is Lando Double or Nothing, written by Rodney Barnes, which shows Lando a few days before his appearance in Solo: A Star Wars Story, so you get a bit more of his relationship with L337, and you get to see Donald Glover's Lando in comic form, both of which are really fun miniseries. I do like a lot more information about Lando. I think he's one of the legacy characters we've had the least amount of information on. I know in Legends there are several books about him, but in the canon I really want more content, and I'm still gunning for that Lando series to come out on Disney Plus or wherever it's going to be, which is apparently still in production, but they've got no more information to give us, so who knows. My hope is it's going to be Billy D. Williams kind of in the framing story, talking about his life when he was younger, and then we get lots of little stories featuring Donald Glover, but I don't know if that's a wish or if that's what's going to happen, unsure. But if you want more Lando content, episode 18 and 37 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. So here is the crawl for Return of the Jedi, Lando. With Han Solo having been captured by the bounty hunter Boba Fett and delivered to Jabba the Hutt, Lando Calrissian and Chewbacca might be his only hope. Using his knowledge of the seediest areas of the galaxy, Lando embarks on a mission that will bring them one step closer to rescuing his old friend Han. But, with Lando's past betrayal, Chewbacca's patience is running thin, and both the Empire and Lando's past seem to be getting closer by the second. So this comic takes place just before Return of the Jedi. You've got Lando who's trying to buy plans for Jabba's palace from a Nikto for 5,000 credits. He's trying to barter and things, the Nikto isn't budging, and then Chewie comes in, grabs the Nikto by the throat, and then starts shaking him, and then Lando manages to get Chewie off of the Nikto and to leave, but then the Nikto says, right, the price has gone up to 10,000 credits now, which Lando obviously couldn't afford either, so leaves. The Nikto then notes that the Empire wanted Lando and that there's a bounty on him that's much higher than 10,000 credits, so he speaks to someone about that. Lando and Chewie are then walking down the street and trying to work out where to go from here. because they need the layout and the schematics for Jabba's palace so they can work out the best way to get in. And Lando also notes that when they were last in Jabba's palace, they were almost killed. And then there's an editor's note, which doesn't actually happen in Star Wars comics that frequently, but there's an editor's note that says this is going to be confirmed in Star Wars number 38, which will be out September 2023. I'm recording this towards the end of May 2023, so there's going to be about 4 months until I even know what this is being referred to. And because of the way I do things on this show, with the Dark Droids crossover and other kind of story arcs going on, yourselves, if you aren't picking up the comics yourself, which again, always recommend people pick up the comics yourselves, but if you aren't, then you're probably going to be waiting until October or November potentially to actually hear what that was all about. So Lando then decides to go and find someone called Elocin, Elocin, I think it's Elocin, might be Elekin, but I think it's a sin, who owns this casino/bar. Now Elocin is blue-skinned and is an alien, face kind of like a fish, but I couldn't find reference to what her species may be, but a blue-skinned fish-headed lady. Not like Admiral Akbar or anything like that, not that kind of fish, slightly different one, but if you pick up the comic you'll know what I mean. So Lando asks her for a favour and she laughs in his face and says she won't lend him any credits because if she does, he'll then just disappear for another 10 years. So Lando says that he wants to play her for it, specifically Sabacc, because that's one of the games that Lando is good at, and then she refuses, noting that he's a cheat, but also he has nothing to offer. She doesn't want another cape, she doesn't want his tacky boots, and then he mentions about the Millennium Falcon and she's like, no, only you and Solo care about that ship, I don't want it. So then in response, Chewie offers his work to Elocin, saying that he will work on 10 different jobs for her. Lando says no, I can't put Chewie in that position, and Elocin completely ignores Lando and agrees with Chewie and they shake on it making a deal. So, onto the games table. So they play a game of Sabacc and Lando wins 2 rounds. Then, on the 3rd round, Lando goes all in. Before it's revealed what hand each Lando and Elocin have, some shots get fired, and it's shown that the Nikto has showed up with some stormtroopers to try and get Lando. So the stormtroopers open fire, and Lando and Elocin as well as Chewie all dive out the way. Lando and Chewie are hiding behind the overturned Sabacc table, while Elocin is trying to fire from a different angle. Chewie then distracts these stormtroopers by lifting up the table and kind of making a big scene, while the other two kind of go around. An Imperial officer grabs Elocin by her throat and has her at blaster point, and Lando then mentions something about a speeder, kind of like a remember that time about the speeder, and so Elocin then ducks, and Lando then tackles into the Imperial, launches them off a balcony into this beast pen that's in the middle. I couldn't find confirmation of what these beasts are, but they don't look like the kind of ones you'd want to be trapped with, and one of the beasts grabs the officer and starts to eat him. Chewie does reach in and manages to grab Lando and pull him out to safety. So then they take out the last of the stormtroopers in this cantina bar place, and then Chewie and Lando head to the Millennium Falcon. Elocin then sends Lando a message and shows that she actually has Jabba's palace's plans. Lando in response then asks what her hand was in the Sabacc game that they were playing, and then she responds by saying, "Hey Lando, please don't come back soon." He says noted, and the transmission ends. Lando then thanks Chewie for betting his life on the line, and then they seemingly have enough information to be able to go and save Han from Jabba. So that, my friends, is where the Lando comic ends. So that is the first batch of 3 that I'm going to be doing of these Return of the Jedi comics. I'm not going to be tackling a certain point of view because I will not have read that in time to be able to probably do it in 2023. I'd be surprised if I even read it next year because it means I have to get through the Empire Strikes Back one first, which, as I said, not overly a fan of. I don't really like anthologies that much, and although the certain point of view books are a really great idea and there are some great stories in there, I did find that there were certain moments where I was just like, this is so hard to read and so boring because I'm just basically getting the same story I know, but from a slightly different perspective, which normally I absolutely love, don't get me wrong, but some of the stories just seem really inconsequential. And I will say the certain point of view, I think there's like 6 stories in a row that are all in Chalmon's Spaceport Cantina, and it just bored me senseless. It was a really rough read. So if anyone is looking to delve into Star Wars literature outside of the comics or anything, I do not recommend starting with a certain point of view. I know several people who did, and it completely put them off. I would recommend starting with Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, or delving into the High Republic, or if you want Star Wars Legends, the Darth Bane trilogy is amazing, or the Aftermath trilogy by Chuck Wendig. There are some amazing books as well, and The Force Collector by Kevin Shinnick. All of those are great places to start. But that's the end of that, friends. So what have we got coming up? So next week I may be releasing my book review on the High Republic book Cataclysm, which is the main adult novel from Phase 2 Wave 2, so it's like the sequel to Convergence. But then I've also got the Quest of the Jedi one-shot, so I may end up tackling that. I've also got the Blade High Republic comic miniseries, so I may end up tackling that. But then the subsequent weeks I've also got lined up Hidden Empire 5, so that's going to be Hidden Empire 5 and also Dr. Aphra, I think it's 29 or something along those lines. And then there's also the first volume of the Yoda miniseries, which there are 10 of comics, so I'll be doing 2 episodes on that. Plus there's also the High Republic Comics Volume 2, but I'm only going to be doing that after I've delved into Cataclysm. And then there's also the main runs of comics set after Hidden Empire, but before the Dark Droids crossover event occurs. And it's been announced that I think the Dark Droids comic, the one-off issue that kind of starts off this big crossover event, I think it's 72 pages long, so I may end up just doing one episode purely on Dark Droids, but that is not going to be released for quite a while yet. I think that's sort of August time, but before we get into Dark Droids, there's still the story arcs that are happening with the main run of Star Wars comics, Dr. Aphra, Darth Vader and Bounty Hunters, all after Hidden Empire. So that's generally what you can expect. I have also recently recorded a review of Thrawn Alliances, which is the second book in the Canon Thrawn trilogy, and I'm going to put that on my Patreon, I think, and then I may end up releasing it on the main feed before Ahsoka comes out. I don't know, but if you keep an eye on my Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/genuinechitchat. For as little as £1 a month, you get access to over 160 or 170 episodes of Afterthoughts, and on there's about 10 Star Wars Legends book reviews at the moment on there, and I'm going to be listening to more Legends stuff once I'm done with this Thrawn trilogy. In fact, I'm going to delve into the Heir to the Empire trilogy, so I'll be releasing my reviews on there. So if you want to get bonus content as well as supporting the show and doing other great things, you can go to patreon.com/genuinechitchat. Only £1 a month and you get access to everything just immediately. Or if you'd rather not sign up to a subscription, you can give me a one-off payment. You can go to Ko-fi, so ko-fi.com/genuinechitchat. You can donate whatever you want. It can be as low as £1 or it can be up to anything more. Obviously, you'll adjust for your own currency if you're not in the UK. But if you do that, I will still send you some bonus content. So if you send me like £1, I'll give you 2 episodes of Afterthoughts. If you send me £2, you get like 5. I've detailed it on the website, but all you need to do is donate, and then in your message just say, yeah, I'd like to have some free content. Please send it to this email, or contact me on social media here, or whatever. Give me some degree of contact details, and then if you want, you can let me know what kind of Afterthoughts you'd like. Whatever it is that you'd want, depending on how much you ask for, will depend on what you kind of get. If you donate quite a large amount, like £10 or more, I will send you like a big chunk of things, and yeah, anyone who supports me on Patreon or on Ko-fi, hugely appreciated, and links are in the description. If you don't want to contribute financially to the show, there's a variety of other ways you can help out. You can rate on Spotify, you can review on Good Pods and Apple Podcasts and Audible and things like that. You can subscribe at youtube.com/genuinechitchat. Every episode of Star Wars Comics and Canon is on there, as well as every episode of Genuine Chit Chat with videos as well. So those are great places to support the show too. You can follow me on social media at Genuine Chit Chat on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. You can share the show with your friends on social media. You can just tell your friends about it in real life if you want. You can do a variety of things, just talking about the show, telling people about the show, financially contributing to the show, rating, reviewing, all those great things. All of them help out the show, but the number one way you can assist and help the show is by continuing to listen and hitting that subscribe button so you can hear even more content from myself. Further to that, if you want to keep up to date with everything that I'm up to, but you don't want to have to follow me on loads of social media platforms, or you're just trying to take a break from social media, you can do it in one easy way. You can click on the link in the description, which is the pccnewsletter.com. Is the Pop Culture Collective newsletter. So in there I give about 200 words of just stuff that I'm up to on Genuine Chit Chat, Star Wars Comics and Canon, or other things I'm involved with. But there's also some incredible other creators on there as well, including Spider Dan the Secret Boars, the Femon Collective, Tony Farina, the VHS Strikes Back. So it's just people who are often associated with the Comics and Motion family, and then the wider family as well. The newsletter is not massive, it's like a page or so, and the information in there is written in a really nice, concise way, and you just are kept up to date with everything I'm up to, and it is weekly. So please consider subscribing to that. And then final things to note, I have actually got some quite exciting news where I recently recorded an interview with George Mann. He is one of the High Republic authors, so that means I've now spoken with Claudia Gray, Cavan Scott, and George Mann. It was an absolutely delightful conversation. We spoke about like modern mythology and writing, and of course we spoke about Star Wars quite a bit as well. So it's really excited to be able to talk to George about that. That episode is going to be out. I'm probably going to put it on this feed as well as on the feed of Genuine Chit Chat in, I think it's going to be a week or two, because my last Genuine Chit Chat episode was speaking with Tony Farina, who is an author. So I wanted to give it a little bit of a gap. I think I've got an episode recording tonight with an entrepreneur. So I think that after I've spoken to that person, I'll release that episode. And then I've still got Disney Discussions 7 recorded. I've got Rebels Reviewed Series 2 recorded. And I've also got the George Mann interview recorded as well. And there's more stuff to come. So please make sure you subscribe in all the usual places, support me wherever you can. I appreciate each and every one of you listening. I'll speak to you next week, potentially with the Cataclysm book review, or it might be something else. I'll figure out when we get there, but just so you have a general idea of what's coming up, it's going to be High Republic stuff, Hidden Empire stuff, and then trying to keep up with some of the comics. But friends, thank you so much as always. I appreciate each and every one of you listening, especially all the way up to the very end. I'll talk to you next week with whatever it is I decide on, and as always, may the Force be with you. The intro for Star Wars Comics in Canon is arranged by myself, Mike Burton, and the backing music was made by Eric Matias of soundimage.org.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars Comics in Canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.